I remember when the term, "it's a Marvel movie," used to mean something good.
Hey dude, you wanna watch Ant-Man? What is that, like a guy that talks to ants?
I mean, yeah, but it is a Marvel movie, so.
Oh, well then, yeah, I'm in. So you mean to tell me that these 5 guys guard the entire galaxy? How's that even possible?
Yeah, it's a Marvel movie.
Oh, then yeah, count me in. Hey man, you wanna watch Howard the Duck? No thanks.
It's a Marvel movie.
Yeah, then I should probably watch it.
But I don't think I'm breaking any new ground by saying I am not a fan of a majority of the films and series Marvel has been putting out lately. So much to the extent that I've lost pretty much any and all interest I could have had in any of their upcoming projects. For me, Love and Thunder was the nail in the coffin. Thor's character arc through Ragnarok and Infinity War was, in my opinion, one of the absolute highlights of the MCU, managing to blend comedy, family drama, and internal struggles with grief and self-doubt in a satisfying and meaningful way. And though Fat Thor is a bit of a step down from all that, I definitely see what they were going for, and it absolutely could have worked had they spent more time developing it, rather than using it as a punchline.
Noob Master, hey, it's Thor again. You know, the God of Thunder? Listen, buddy, if you don't log off this game immediately, I'm gonna fly over to your house, come down to that basement you're hiding in, rip off your arms, and shove them up your butt!
But it seems that would become the theme with Thor, as his latest installment treats him like the fourth stooge.
Listen, we good? Yeah? I mean, I know it's a little weird having my ex-weapon around, but come on, Mjolnir in the past. It's you and me now, buddy.
Character assassination aside, the film is riddled with plot holes, contrivances, and inconsistencies, including, but not limited to, if Mjolnir could put itself back together, why didn't it do so immediately after it was broken? If Thor could imbue his powers onto others, why didn't he do so when the Avengers were fighting Thanos? If Thor knew about the Realm of Eternity this whole time, why didn't he and the Avengers seek it out to reverse the snap, rather than literally inventing fucking time travel? If Gore truly believed that the gods didn't care about anyone but themselves, why would he think kidnapping children would have any effect on Thor? Also, if Gore's entire motivation is to avenge his daughter, who he loved so much, why would he even think about fucking with other people's children? And if you say it's because he was being possessed by the Necroblade, that proposes an entirely new question. If Gore was just using the children to get Stormbreaker from Thor, why wouldn't he have killed them once he got it, instead of bringing them with him to the entrance of the Realm of Eternity like a fucking kindergarten field trip? As well, how the fuck is it possible for anyone to steal a weapon whose primary function is to return to the owner upon his beckoning? And lastly, why does Korg insist his entire species is male and as such he has 2 dads, when he directly mentions the fact that he has a mother only 2 films prior?
Oh, well, I tried to start a revolution but didn't print enough pamphlets, so hardly anyone turned up, except for my mum and her boyfriend, who I hate.
I understand wanting LGBTQ plus representation, but do them all a favor and think before you write. Honestly, do you understand how disheartening it is for my nearly 10-year-old brother to walk up to me and say, "Hey Ryan, I just saw the new Thor movie and didn't understand this, this, and this. Can you please explain it to me?" Little does he know I've been asking myself those same questions ever since the movie came out, and the only answer I can possibly come up with is that it's just bad writing. It seems that after just about 10 years of average to above average, and occasionally great storytelling, with complex and relatable characters at the center of it all, Marvel seems to have just given up. Hell, I haven't even seen She-Hulk, Ms. Marvel, or Moon Knight, nor do I ever plan to. In fact, I think I'm pretty much done with the MCU. Or that was until I saw the trailer for Werewolf by Night, which, I'm not gonna lie, genuinely got me a little excited. Just from what they showed in the trailer, I could tell they were emulating the Universal style of monster movies released primarily throughout the 30s and 40s. And if you've seen this video, you'd know that horror is one of, if not, my favorite genre. And classic horror? Well, let's just say classic horror is real horror. I was a little uneasy going in, but as soon as I saw that Marvel logo turn grayscale, and the slashes rip across the screen, I was pumped. And about 50 minutes later, as the credits started to roll, I was pumped again, only this time with disappointment. And I know it's a modern Marvel movie, I shouldn't have expected anything, but I'm just a sucker for the good old days, when the phrase, "it's a Marvel movie," meant it's really good. And that's on me, that's my fault. But without any further ado, let's just get into it. The first thing that caught my attention was the film's minuscule runtime, sitting at a tight 55 minutes. At first, I saw this as a great thing. A big problem I've been having with Marvel projects of late is how much they bungle their pacing. For example, While the Eternals easily had a whole 12 to 22 episodes worth of content all shoved into a 2.5-hour movie, forcing the plot along at breakneck speeds with little room for character development, Loki had about 2 hours of content stretched over 6 40-minute episodes, adding an unnecessary and approximate 2 hours of padding that only serves to slow the story down. I figured this is likely due to Disney and Marvel wanting to maintain their presence in the cinema while also experimenting with the merits of streaming, without properly understanding which of their stories will work for each format. So when I heard that Werewolf by Night would be a 55-minute special presentation, I figured Marvel had figured out exactly how much time was needed to tell this story, and had modified their typical format to accommodate it. I was wrong. The movie, sorry, I can't call it that, the presentation, starts off with a charming opening title screen, before transitioning into a nice little illustrated foreword to the larger supernatural world that we're just about to see for the very first time in the MCU. Aside from that, the whole setup is that a famous monster hunter has died, and left his ancient magical MacGuffin, I mean the Bloodstone, for a group of lesser monster hunters to compete for in a formal hunt. The premise is a bit played out, but seeing as how they're going for a much older, classical aesthetic, I'll bite. After all, this does seem like a story premise from the 30s or 40s. Because it probably is. The stone has been strapped to a monster who has been set loose in a labyrinth. The first one to kill it gets the stone, and whoever gets the stone, I guess, is the heir to the estate. So the stakes are high. But before we get into the hunt, we're first introduced to the hunters. Literally none of them are important except our main character Jack, who is the titular werewolf by night, and Elsa, the estranged daughter of the Bloodstone's now deceased owner, and she's come back to reclaim it. And boy is she a massive dick about it. I think the writers were going for a badass rebel character here, but it ends up coming off like a child constantly throwing a temper tantrum. Jack, on the other hand, is very collected and observant, which I personally think is a refreshing take on the werewolf formula. It's very common to tell a werewolf story from the perspective of someone who just got bit, watching them devolve into a disheveled mess while trying to figure out a cure. It's rather nice to see here a character who's quite clearly had the time to get a handle on his situation and has learned to live accordingly. He understands how to operate around his curse, and therefore looks at it as just another normal thing to take care of, like laundry or vacuuming. In one exchange with Elsa, he says,
I know. I'm an idiot, I know. But I'm also a human. Perhaps not in the category that you would call a human. You see, I've got systems to manage the hurt I could cause. They work. You'd be surprised. They actually work. Because I'm not like that. I'm like this. So you got nothing to worry about. Because I lock myself in once a month, every full moon. That's it. And the next full moon is in 5 days. We have plenty of time to figure something out.
which I think is a very clever and direct way of getting everything I just said across in an efficient and unobtrusive manner. Unfortunately, though, this aspect of the character isn't explored a whole lot, and apart from it, he's a bit of a blank slate. We don't learn much in the way of, well, really anything about him. Along with the Hunters, we're introduced to the most comically evil villain since Dr. Evil. The filmmakers waste no time establishing her as an antagonist, with her first scene being a verbal assault on Elsa, whom I can only assume is her stepdaughter. She then introduces the hunt, and each hunter by their number of confirmed kills, though she specifically introduces Jack's as confirmed deaths.
Over 100 deaths, give or take.
I thought this line was clever, at first, because it had yet to be directly revealed that Jack was in fact a werewolf. And in a good movie, this kind of verbal distinction might be meant to cue the audience in that something is off about Jack, and that this woman knows what that is. However, after finishing the movie, I realized that she didn't know he was a werewolf at this point in the story, nor did she even suspect it, so this distinction is made for absolutely no reason. Then Elsa has a small tantrum.
Dear heart. Thank you.
The evil woman also states that the stone will be affixed to the monster in order to weaken it during the hunt. I suppose so as to not allow for it to escape. As well, the only weapons they're allowed to use are scattered across the grounds like a Call of Duty map. Then Elsa has a tantrum.
Have you checked up your own arms?
Elsa!
They enter the labyrinth one at a time, but don't begin the ceremonial pledge until after the first person, Jack in this case, has started his entrance, meaning that whoever goes first doesn't get to do the chant with everybody else. Which isn't a flaw in the movie per se, I just thought it was kinda mean to whoever goes first. Now here is where the bad pacing began to rear its ugly head. Jack's approach to the labyrinth is very slow, with this deep horn playing every couple of steps. It works well to create an unsettling atmosphere, and enforce the feeling that Jack is walking into a potentially scary and dangerous situation. As he enters, we get this really nice shot of the labyrinth itself, before cutting back to Jack, who's now fully inside it. He takes a few steps before we hear the horn again. This is where my heart got pumping, because now not only is the danger laid out before him, but it's slowly creeping up behind him. He's trapped, and the only way out is to descend further into the labyrinth. Now, this is also where they should have maintained the slower pacing. Maybe not for all the Hunter's entrances, but at least let this one play out. Instead, they decide to immediately jump from Hunter to Hunter, showing us that they're all already inside the labyrinth, diminishing the importance of Jack entering first, and entirely backtracking on the feeling of danger creeping in. Now it's just there. Please, tell me which one of these is more ominous. As soon as that's over, we get the cardinal sin of modern horror. A pointless jump scare. Two people bumping into each other is not an appropriate time for a jump scare, and just makes your writing look cheap. This isn't a problem exclusive to Werewolf by Night, but a problem with modern horror as a whole. Just as loud does not equal funny, loud also doesn't equal scary. And while I'm not opposed to writers and directors utilizing jump scares as a tool to amplify their stories, it's important to understand that a genuine scare and a jump scare are not the same thing. A genuine scare is something that causes the audience to be immensely disturbed, whether visually, morally, and often even emotionally. I often think of the ending to both the 1958 and 1986 versions of The Fly as examples, as they both expertly check all these boxes simultaneously. On the other hand, a jump scare is simply startling the audience for a brief moment using quick visuals and/or loud audio, often having been preceded by the exact opposite. A good example being this clip from Ghosts of War. The major difference between the two is that a genuine scare, if done right, tends to stay with you long after the movie is over, just kind of fucking with your head for the next couple hours, while jump scares tend to be quick, in the moment, and just as soon forgotten. But occasionally, if a jump scare is done well enough, it can transcend being just a jump scare and become a genuine scare. A great example of this is that clip from Ghosts of War. Swear to God, if I close my eyes and just think about that scene, I can start to feel the breath go cold on my lips, and hear so vividly the shaking of the metal gun. That scene has been etched into my mind. This scene only serves to annoy me. Another thing that annoys me is that the bearded man clearly has the element of surprise here, but gives it away because our main characters have plot armor. Jack and Elsa end up getting locked inside a small mausoleum, and as you could predict, she throws a small tantrum.
Wow, thank you for that.
I have to get out of here.
Only think I don't.
Regardless, she's hurt and he knows how to help. And, since they're both conventionally attractive, you know what this means. A forced romance subplot. Thankfully, like its other themes, the film doesn't explore it too much, usually leaving it all to the undertones. But it does affect something later on, so I figured we should establish it here. Another thing this scene establishes is literally everything else. The writers decided to cram all of the character development into this one scene, which obviously doesn't work, with the entirety of the interaction thus feeling less like two characters engaging in a provocative and revealing conversation, and more like two plot devices desperately trying to explain away the story so they can get to the action set pieces. And a lot of the developments that are made in this scene I expected to happen, just not all at the same time. They needed to slow the pacing down by a lot, though I suppose with a 55-minute runtime, they can't afford any nuance. Man, I've seen 20-minute independent YouTube videos with deeper and more subtle character development than this big-budget studio production. Speaking of big budget, the CGI sucks, which I know has become the new standard for Marvel, but this time it's especially insulting because the character that gets the most amount of CGI work happens to be Man-Thing. That's right, the monster they've been hunting this whole time has been Man-Thing. This is actually his third appearance in the MCU, but first time being physically present on screen.
Where is this fridge? What was in there? Who or what is a Man-Thing? I swear I need a cocktail and a lobotomy.
And it's a bit of a letdown. First off, it's never explained how the Bloodstone family managed to capture Man-Thing, a being who has the ability to travel between the dimensions, universes, and realities, so... Even if it was via the use of the Bloodstone, as it's stated that it weakens monsters, the Bloodstone was nowhere near Man-Thing at the beginning of the movie, so why couldn't he just hop into another reality real quick? Now, admittedly, it's been a while since I've actually read a Man-Thing comic, so if I am misrepresenting his powers, I apologize. But I find it very hard to believe that this motherfucker was able to capture Man-Thing, unless that's the entire reason he's dead in the first place. Second, the character, aside from one killing, is played pretty much exclusively for comedy. You don't hype up a character for a decade just to have him be comedic relief. Imagine if Thanos was hyped up for as long as he was, and then when he finally shows up, he starts flossing. It's just not going to go over well with many fans of the character. As well, he's not developed at all. He's really only there to give Jack a reason to be there, as the two are supposedly friends, and Jack is only participating in the hunt as a means to rescue him. Lastly, the character looks awful. Don't get me wrong, the design is fine. The design is good, but its integration into the environment is bad. Though I won't harp too much on that because I know Marvel's SFX team is probably just 2 volunteers in a Commodore 64. Now, I've actually read that they used an animatronic for Man-Thing, but I'm not buying that shit, not even for a second. This is an animatronic. This is CGI. As well, by now I'm sure you've noticed I've been splicing in footage from the 2005 Man-Thing movie, and that's because he's barely in this movie. I've had to use like the same 3 scenes for this entire review. So Jack and Elsa escape from the mausoleum, because Elsa suddenly remembers where her father told her the key was. This would have been a good time to have them earn their escape by working together, but manufacturing a plot contrivance is just as easy, I suppose. Cut to 4 minutes later, and they've successfully found Man-Thing, killed the bearded guy, reached a crack in the wall, used an explosive to blow a hole in said wall, retrieved the Bloodstone, set Man-Thing free, and made 2 jokes about his name being Ted. You see what I mean about the pacing? It's very slow and ominous, as it should be, but then every 10 minutes or so speeds up exponentially to fit within the runtime. Jack goes to pick up the stone, despite being told on several occasions that it weakens monsters.
Yeah, they said that the stone would do that.
And surprise, surprise, it weakens him. Everyone arrives to see this, and now they all know he's a monster, including Elsa, who's not too happy about it. But she gets over it in the next scene, so we're fine. This is, however, where Elsa's stepmom begins amplifying her obviously evil dialogue.
The hunt decides! House rules.
Elsa and Jack wake up in a cage, and for the most part, I actually like Jack's dialogue here. He wakes up very calmly, realizes his situation, and calmly explains to Elsa that despite him technically being a monster, she has nothing to worry about. It's very clear from his put-together demeanor that he's been in these kinds of situations before, possibly loads of times. Like I said before, you don't often get werewolf characters like this, and I'll give credit where it's due. It's a refreshing take. Though with this positive comes a glaring negative.
You don't get it, mate.
Elsa's dialogue gets under my skin. She sounds like she's pouting through the entire exchange. I guess she thinks if she throws a full tantrum like she normally does, the Wolfman might kill her. But on top of that, she caps off my favorite line from Jack with this little reveal.
And the next full moon is in 5 days. We have plenty of time to figure something out.
5 days. The Bloodstone's capable of transforming you in 5 seconds.
Despite that, given all the information I currently have on the Bloodstone, that reveal makes no sense, Jack's response to this information is great. He begins looking around the room at the mounted heads with a sinking horror. This is his fate. It's a nice recontextualization of an earlier scene. And now Jack starts to panic. We can see it through his movements, hear it in his voice, and feel it through the cinematography. This is the kind of werewolf character you typically see in the movies. And the way they maneuver Jack's more put-together character into this more traditional, disheveled one is subtle and well-deserved. Then it takes a left turn into more lazy writing as Jack begins aggressively smelling Elsa in order to remember her when he turns. Now, in the original Wolfman, it's impossible for Lawrence to stop himself while in werewolf form. Even his own father is on the chopping block, which adds a layer of horror for Lawrence, because he isn't just killing strangers, he's also killing the people he loves. In the Wolfman 2010, he's almost able to stop himself from killing his brother's widow, Gwen, who is his lover, and who he's known for a very long time, but even she can only stop him long enough to shoot him. So excuse me if I call bullshit on Jack being able to stop himself from killing a woman he just met. I mean, come on, she's not even that hot. Jokes aside, it goes against the whole point of the werewolf's curse, and only serves to solidify Jack as a flawless protagonist, which is never good unless you happen to be writing the Bible. A big aspect of good horror, at least classic horror, is the concept of moral ambiguity. Take Frankenstein, for example. In that film, who is the real monster? The actual monster? A mass murderer who doesn't mean to kill but does, never understanding the sacredness of life? Or the remorseful doctor, who only wanted to bring life to his creation, even if it meant lying, stealing, and desecrating corpses? There's a fair argument for both, and there's a fair argument for neither. That's the horrific beauty of moral ambiguity. It forces the audience to ask these unanswerable questions about their own moral convictions. This approach is central to many classic horror movies, especially werewolf movies. The reason the final scene of The Wolfman hits so hard is because both Lawrence and his father were simultaneously in the right and wrong. They were both good men doing bad things. Lawrence attempted murder, though out of his control, and his father filicide in order to stop him. It's an ugly situation from both perspectives that everyone can agree no one wants to be in. But a good horror movie can blur the lines between right and wrong until there's nothing left but what is. It's not right, it's not wrong, it just is, and there's nothing you can do about it. Given that context, how do you think Werewolf by Night approaches moral ambiguity? If you guess that it doesn't, and in fact actively walks in the opposite direction, creating a flawless protagonist and a comically evil antagonist, you just want a free subscription to my channel. All you have to do is hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss another video. I'm becoming craftier with my plugs. Now let me clarify what I mean by a flawless protagonist, because I know the term a lot of you are probably expecting me to use is Mary Sue, but that isn't exactly what I mean. Don't get me wrong, there is a bit of that at play here, but what I'm really referring to is how, despite everyone treating Jack like a monster, we, the audience, are never given a reason to believe that. We are told through dialogue that he has killed people because of the werewolf's curse before, but never do we get to see any of that, and what killing we do see is all done in self-defense. But even then we see Jack actively avoid doing even that. And since the only dialogue divulging Jack's killings is delivered from Dr. Evil over here, the audience never has any reason to question Jack's morality. He is the good guy. And in case anyone has the notion that this is also a superhero movie, therefore it has to have an obvious good guy and bad guy, you're the reason Deadpool sucked. So Elsa's stepmother holds a little ceremony, using the Bloodstone to force Jack into turning, because I guess the Bloodstone can do anything. Now, every good werewolf movie needs a good transformation scene, but seeing as how this is just a subpar werewolf movie, I'm rather torn on its transformation scene. I like the image they have going of having Elsa cowering in full view, juxtaposed with the simplicity of the shadow in the background, as you can hear Jack howling and screaming throughout the process. It's very Hitchcockian in the way that it forces your brain to imagine the details. However, I can't determine whether or not they did this out of creative intent, or just not caring enough to fuck around with a more detailed transformation. Either way, it's done well enough, and I think the werewolf design looks pretty good. It's simple and more human-like, in line with classic movie werewolves. And the fight scenes with him are done well, not cutting too often, and playing into his more hunched-over design, though the hallway scene suffers from a bit of the Last Jedi syndrome. Together, Jack and Elsa kill the remaining hunters and the evil old lady. Jack gets to leave with Man-Thing, and Elsa gets to keep the Bloodstone, which activates Technicolor mode because I guess the Bloodstone can do anything. Now, the film's not egregiously bad, but it's definitely not good. So if I were to quantify its quality on a scale from 0 to 100, 100 being perfect and 0 being Mac and me, I'd say it's probably somewhere in the solid 40s range. It has a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. Fucking what? I mean, I know Rotten Tomatoes is a hack site, but by their own scale, you mean to tell me that this shit is better than Blade? You mean to tell me that this shit is better than the original Wolfman? You mean to tell me that this shit is better than the Country Bears? That movie is about bears that sing country music. If you have anything negative to say about that movie, you can suck my balls. Look, I don't recommend you watch this movie. Sorry, special presentation. However, if you're interested in any of the concepts it touches upon, I can give you some recommendations as to what to watch instead. You want to watch people hunting people? Watch The Most Dangerous Game. You want to watch people hunting monsters? Just watch The Host. You want to watch a brilliant werewolf movie with themes of love, both familial and romantic? Just watch The Wolfman, the 1941 original or the 2010 remake. They're both masterpieces. And if you were watching this for Man-Thing, just go to Pornhub. Just kidding. But in all seriousness, if you were watching this for Man-Thing, just watch Swamp Thing instead. But if you want a shittier, watered-down version of all of the above, then you can't go wrong with Werewolf by Night. And I mean, it's not abhorrently bad. Like, it's not a total piece of shit. It's just incredibly disappointing. So let this be a lesson. Next time Disney throws a promising superhero movie your way, just be sure to first lower your expectations. After all, it's not like you're watching a Marvel movie. Oh, wait.